Right, I think we'll make a start on this session. Quite a few new people again. Good to see so many participants, and hopefully a few more will join as we go through. So, welcome if you're just joining us to SCF's Young Crofters Gathering 2020. This is the first time we've had one of these gatherings online on using Zoom, and it's been working really well all day. We've had some really interesting presentations, lots of contributions, and interaction from people from all over the Crofton counties. So we're moving into the final session of the day now, and we're going to, before we move into the panel discussion, and I'll remind you that we're looking for questions for the panel, and you can pop those in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that, and so will Ailsa. We already have some questions from the Mentimeter session earlier on, so we'll try and fit in as many as possible, but if you can pop your questions in the chat, that would be great. But before we move on to the panel discussion, we've got a short video from the Cabinet Secretary for the Rural Economy, Fergus Ewing. And just before the video was played, it's just mentioned that we didn't give Mr. Ewing all the information about the Young Crofters Awards. So there may be a slight issue with some of the things he says about the awards, but we'll just ignore that bit of the video. The awards the awards are being launched today. We're not announcing the winner, and the nominees haven't been announced either. So Ailsa is going to now play the video, the message from Fergus Ewing.
Sorry, give me 1 minute.
No worries.
Oh, lost him.
So just about the awards, following the panel discussion that's coming up next, we will be launching the Young Crofters Awards and giving you all the information about that and how you can nominate people and what the procedure will be for closing date and yeah, all the information you need to nominate people. So and we'll hopefully be having some sort of event to mark that when we announce the winner.
Sorry, Donald. I think it's going to work this time.
Okay.
Bless you, hopefully.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and it's a great privilege to be taking part, albeit virtually and not in person, in this gathering, Young Crofters gathering today. And as the Minister in the Scottish Government responsible for crofting, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to say a few words to you today. First of all, young people are at the very heart of the crofting communities. I'm determined that we should do what we can in the government to support and sustain crofting as a way of life and as part of our traditions that are important to our heritage. I'm sure that many of you will take a close interest in the history of crofting and the battle to secure security of tenure in the late 1880s and the other events where crofters stood up for their own right to their own land, both before and after the First World War. We've moved on a long way since then, and I'm very pleased that this government has provided support, financial support, to enable over 1,000 families through the assistance of a grant, to establish their own croft house on their own land. That's, I think, an achievement which means a lot, because we do want to see Scotland re-peopled. We do see many remote rural communities, both in the mainland and on our islands, where people have had to leave to pursue career opportunities elsewhere in the cities. And therefore, trying to reinvigorate remote rural communities and re-people them is important. I think that the provision of broadband, and we're devoting several hundred millions of pounds to do that on the most remote and island communities, that the provision of superfast broadband will enable people to do things in remote rural parts of the country which hitherto could only be done in cities. Next year we will be publishing our, or later this year, I'm sorry, we'll be publishing the National Development Plan for crofting, and this will set out a long-term strategic approach. And we want to facilitate crofters to develop crofting activity, to remove barriers. We want to tackle neglect and absenteeism and encourage a culture of succession and turnover of crofts. Each of these, not without its challenges, but these are some of the aims that we have. I'm conscious of time. I don't want to overstay my virtual welcome, but I did want to take this opportunity and in particular to wish all nominees for the Young Crofter of the Year 2020 all good luck and well done to each one of you. And just let me finish by saying that when we come to terms with the COVID crisis and tackle the challenges that Brexit face, we remain firmly committed to the future of crofting. It's part of the Highlands, it's part of our culture and our heritage. It's part of who we are.
Good stuff. Well, thank you very much to Mr. Ewing for that message, message of support for crofting and all the work that the Scottish Government is currently doing to support crofting. So we'll now move into the panel discussion. I'm seeing there's been a couple more questions in the chat, so just keep those coming, and Ailsa's going to keep an eye on them for me and let me know if any more come in. But I'm keeping an eye on it as well. So first of all, I think it'd be good to just introduce the panel members. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves and just say who you are and the organisation that you represent and anything else that you think may be relevant before we move into the questions. So can I start off with Bill?
Hi Donald, thank you. I'm Bill Dundas. I'm the area manager for Argyll and Western Isles for rural payments inspections. So that covers the offices in Benbecula, Balvanach, Stornoway, Keith Street, in Oban, and our office in Tiree that delivers day-to-day scheme work for Crofthouse Grant. I'm also have the delivery responsibility for Crofthouse Grant, and I have quite a lot of technical involvement in the CAG scheme. And then probably finally, I chair quite a lot of local goose groups around my area, Lewis and Harris, Uist, Tiree and Col, and Isla from a crofting sense. Thanks, Donald.
Thanks. And Claudia?
Very much, and hello to everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I would have really liked to have heard the video clips this morning, but I didn't have a chance to join. I'm Claudia Rouse. I'm Head of Natural Resource Management for SNH, Scottish Natural Heritage, soon to be Nature Scot. And the change in our name is about putting more clarity and emphasis on putting nature first. So I'm really pleased about that change. I'm responsible for our national land use policy on agriculture, forestry, crofting, sporting management, and just my little bit of credibility is I used to be a crofting and farming advisor on Shetland for about 5 years, a while ago now. But anyhow, I have spared my time round many crofts in Shetland, and I hope some of you might be here, who knows? Anyhow, that's me, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Siobhan?
Hi everyone. Hi, my name is Siobhan MacDonald and I work for SAC in the crofting areas. Mine is a dream job. It's really good fun most of the time. I give advice to crofters on all sorts of things. I do a fair shift of filling in application forms for grants and IACS forms, etc. And I also deliver the croft and small farm element of the farm advisory service too. And in my spare time, I have a croft with a spring calving herd and an autumn calving herd, 1 cow in each, and some sheep. That's
excellent. Rod Mackenzie?
Hi Donald, yeah, sorry, I think I dropped out there for a minute, so my apologies. I'm in Caithness today and I'm using the wonders of technology. I am sitting on a lovely day here on the phone, so the 4G is holding out quite well. Right, okay, I'm Rod Mackenzie, I'm the convener of the Crofting Commission. I'm an elected commissioner for the East Highlands, and a crofter as well. I'm just a bit frustrated about crofting and where it's going, in that I like to use a croft well and see land being used, and people not being given opportunities. My main job is and has been for a long number of years as an auctioneer, and I feel that I've been in contact with many crofters in many counties, you know, Western Isles, Northern Isles, North of Scotland, West of Scotland. And those who use crofts well, it's a joy to see. But going round the counties, there are a lot being misused, neglected, and not being inhabited. So I think that chimes with probably a lot of SCF's aims and objectives, and that's what we're here today for. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Excellent, thanks, Rod. Gordon?
Hi, I'm Gordon Jackson. I'm Head of Agricultural Development and Crofting within the Scottish Government Agricultural Policy Division, and I'm pleased to be here today. So it's a great event. I listened into some of the earlier material and it's most interesting. So I head up the Agricultural Development Division, and it takes in a range of different things like the Agricultural Wages Board, for example. It takes in the Farm Advisory Service, Knowledge Transfer and Innovation Fund, crofting policy, and sponsorship of the crofting division, crofting commission itself. So a range of different things within the umbrella of agricultural development.
Thanks, Gordon. And finally, Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Krauser. I'm the Chief Executive of the Scottish Crofting Federation. For those that were here this morning, Donald introduced the organisation as the only organisation that's dedicated to the representation of crofters. And so we basically what we do is in two streams. One is that we do representative work, i.e. we do lobbying and we sit on stakeholder groups and participate on behalf of crofters, so that there's the voice of crofters put out there. But also equally important is that we do development work as well. So we've run various development projects in the past, and our sort of flagship development work is our training program, which has been running for I think 21 years this year. So I'm really just on the panel, not as a policy maker. I'm sure most of your questions, if not all your questions, will be to the policymakers, but I'm just on the panel in case anyone wants to ask anything about the SCF or what we're doing or whatever. So.
Excellent. So that makes up the panel. I'll also point out we've got Aileen Rohr and Michael Nugent from the Crofting Development Team in the Scottish Government, and they will be able to come in and answer any questions specifically on the National Development Plan or anything that Gordon maybe thinks are better directed towards them. So great that we've got you all here today. A really good panel, and yeah, let's get straight into the questions. So a nice easy one to start you all off. Just to look at the title of the event, Crofting Policy, What's the Plan? So could you just outline very briefly what the priorities are for your organisation or department, or even personally, if it's a bit difficult to explain your organisation's approach, but what are the priorities for crofting development in the next few years? And we'll kick off with Bill, since we start with you. I'll try and mix it up who I get to answer first.
Okay, thanks, Donald. I mean, I think in terms of scope where I have some influence, Croft House Grant, we revamped the grant scheme and made a number of changes to it, which has been running now fairly successfully. I think we've increased the rate, and we've added additional scrutiny to it, and that's allowed us to target the grant scheme at people who otherwise couldn't previously have afforded to build a house. So we've been looking to get into individuals and families where the grant genuinely does make a difference. And part of our prioritisation has been in requiring activity, a commitment to activity for the length of grant conditions. That's quite a big change, and it's something that some crofters weren't very happy with, but we think it's making a big difference. The second element that we've changed is that we opened up with the revamp of the scheme. We opened up the ability for crofters who had decrofted their houses to apply for house improvements, and that's something we don't see very much of at the moment in terms of applications. So if you're sitting in a croft house and you're active and you've got improvements that you need done, significant size improvements, we want to hear from you. And there's a good chance you'll be successful in your application. So really pleased at those changes, and we're involved with Patrick and other stakeholders to tweak that as we go along. CAGS wise, we're trying to make improvements to the performance of our scheme. If you've had any dealings with us over the last few years on CAGS, you might have found some of it quite frustrating, particularly if you've had to wait quite a long time for a claim to be paid. So I've been involved in a block of work trying to make improvements to our ability to process applications and claims, because we know it takes too long, and we know it takes too long if you've got a claim outstanding. So those changes aren't in place yet, but we're really hopeful that they're going to come soon, and that they will make a tangible difference. So that's probably the two areas I'm involved in. It's here and now. I mean, obviously, there's massive changes coming in potentially coming further down the horizon beyond 2024. But for here and now, that's really what I'm involved in.
Thanks, Bill. Claudia, what are SNH's priorities for crofting going forward in the next few years? Where are you on this?
Thanks, Donald. I'll just say very briefly, you'll maybe be glad to hear, you know, our sort of headline vision for Scotland is for a nature-rich future. And, you know, we can't do any of that on our own. We rely on all of the people who are managing the land to deliver that vision. So we want to see a vibrant, active crofting community and the people managing the land to benefit biodiversity, address the losses that we've seen across Scotland, really significant losses in biodiversity over the last 20 years. They've kind of hung on in a lot of the crofting counties because of the low intensity management, but there have also been species losses, which, you know, some of you will have seen. So we want you to be part of restoring that over this next decade. It's the United Nations decade of ecological restoration, and we want Scotland to be a world leader in showing what that means and restoring biodiversity, and obviously being at the front of addressing climate change, emissions and sequestration. So the adaptation, the management of land to store carbon in the soils, in the grasslands, in the peatlands that are really prevalent over the crofting counties. It's a you know, massive opportunity, I think, for crofting to be really relevant to some of the biggest challenges that society faces. And for us as well, it's an essential part of the green recovery and the response to COVID. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. And Siobhan, you must come across a lot of the problems in your day job, the things that are maybe don't go so well with crofting, but also some of the successes as well. Where do you think the priorities should be going forward in the next few years?
Yes, well, I suppose SAC, we don't create any policies, but we work with crofters to help them adapt to policy changes. And I think there's a kind of a misconception that crofters aren't very innovative, but that's not our experience. And we work with lots of very forward-thinking crofters, so we try and help them by translating research and helping them to get ahead. So our mission statement, I suppose, is to help the rural economy and environment, which sounds very general, but that is our aim, to help crofting remain vibrant and to help crofters improve their own businesses.
Great. Rod.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. As you know, Crofting Commission or regulate crofting. The policies that the Crofting Commission follow are fairly basic, actually, and the fact that we want croft to be resided on. We want them to be used innovatively and put to purposeful use. And this has a lot of great benefits. Claudia mentioned them there just now. Low intensity systems, which actually crofting was and still is in certain areas. But I think the worst thing that is, or the second worst thing against a low intensity system is probably a system that's not used at all. So if you've got a high intensity system, yes, it's not very good for the environment, but I think if land isn't managed in a responsible and sustainable way, and I would point neglect in that direction, it's worse for the environment. The other thing, Bill mentioned it there through the housing grant scheme, and that is key to population retention. And I don't think we've nailed the population retention solution yet. Some areas, everybody thinks remote areas are islands or whatever, but some of the remote areas are maybe the northwest of Scotland, where I suppose it's a multi-strand, where it needs to be jobs, it needs to be crofting, it needs to be houses, it needs to be services and infrastructure. And I think maybe crofting hasn't got all the answers to that one. But I do think a good crofting community or a vibrant crofting community will help to maintain population. Other things are shortening the food chains. That's become very, very apparent in the last few months, where we've seen, long food chains, and one link gets broken, and then there's a shortage of food. I think food can be produced in crofting areas, saves the cost of production, it saves the cost of transport, and I think that has been vastly neglected in the last few years. And I think Patrick maybe wants to speak about it. I don't know if he wants to speak about it today, but I think SCF are starting or going to start or resurrect discussion on local food production and such like in the next wee while, and I think that'll be very interesting. And that's something the Commission would be keenly, we would like to be involved in that too and promote that to crofting. So yeah, many things to do, and it's good that we get people with the same mind together. So yeah, thanks Donald.
It's certainly something that's come up a lot today, the emphasis on local food production, and even coming through as a result of the coronavirus situation itself, it's been highlighted. So it's certainly going to be a theme going forward, I think, and something that SCF would be keen to work with the Commission on. Gordon, what are the Scottish Government's priorities for crofting at the moment?
Hopefully we've all picked up some of the highlights, the priorities from the Cabinet Secretary's address in his short video. But to summarise some of the highlights, he highlighted, amongst other things, the importance of preserving the cultural inheritance and the crofting way of life. He's quite clear about that's where he comes from, and he sees that as being very important. He sees the need to tackle neglect and absenteeism, and Rod has made mention of that as well. Benefits of encouraging a culture of succession and turnover for crofts, which will help young people get back into crofting, taking over for people who no longer wish or are able to undertake crofting activity. And of course, repeopling, the Cabinet Secretary mentioned, is a cornerstone of ensuring that sustainable crofting communities continue to exist. And Rod has made mention of the population retention challenge that we have. In terms of specifics, enabling policy measures, we've got CAGs that Bill mentioned, we've got Croft House grants that Bill mentioned as well. We continue to see these important measures to have an impact in the future. Broadband, mentioned by the Cabinet Secretary. Siobhan mentioned the Farm Advisory Service, which is key to ensuring that crofters are well informed in what they do and to promote innovation. And of course, facilitating the Crofting Commission to take action in all the areas that needs to be taken action in, including dealing with the duties and dealing with neglect and absenteeism.
Thanks, Gordon. Patrick, do you want to quickly give a wee spiel about SCF's priorities at the moment?
You? Sure. Well, we're sort of guided by the 5 actions for crofting, which was something that we put together some years ago, and is I think in those 5 actions are still really current. So if I could just very quickly go through them. One was deliver crofting development, and our aspiration there was that the crofting development would come under one well-funded body, the Crofting Commission. We're really pleased to see that it is coming back to the Crofting Commission, and there's the question of what is crofting development, and Rod has hit on one which I think is iconic, and that is the whole point about the food chain, and that crofting provides this resilience and is something that needs to be nurtured. So Rod, unfortunately you missed the session earlier that was on the Scottish crofting produce mark, but you can see it, and I would urge you to have a look at it, because all of this will go up on YouTube on our channel. So another action for crofting was simplify crofting legislation, and we and many other people have spent a lot of time and effort on this, including Scottish Government, and it's been put to the side for the moment because of Brexit, but that will get picked up on again. Something that's very relevant with the whole Brexit thing is the third one was target financial incentives, and this was about how we use the CAP particularly, and with Brexit we won't have the CAP anymore. We'll have our own Scottish agricultural system, and so it will be very important that crofting is represented well in the discussions that are going to take place on what that system looks like and how government support is divvied out. The fourth one was increase affordable housing. This is something that we were very keen to see, particularly the Croft House grant scheme being reviewed and revamped, which it has been, and without a doubt the scheme works so much better than it did. So that's a plus for everyone involved, particularly the fact that the government sat and looked at this and said, yeah, okay, what should happen to it? And I've saved the last one, as I think this is the most important one, and I know that having spoken to commissioners, including Rod, they feel this is probably at the top of the list as well, and that is make crofts available. And this is very relevant for this particular gathering, which is aimed at or organised by you, the younger people. Making crofts available is absolutely essential. So it's bringing unused or neglected crofts or absentee crofts back into use, making them available to young people, getting them occupied and used. And it's also the creation of new crofts, half of which would be woodland crofts. I always argue that if we think that crofting is good, then why aren't we spreading it out, as was the original intention, spreading it out to the rest of Scotland? And I say, as was the original intention, the reason that crofting, the line is a diagonal going across from Murray down to Argyll, is that it was stopped. The rollout was stopped. So we want to see that continuation of the rollout of crofting across Scotland. Is that an okay aspiration, Donald?
Yep, sounds good, Patrick, thanks. And that sets us up nicely for the next question. So in our session earlier on, when we did ask for questions for this session, one thing stood out, and it's that access to croftland question. And it keeps on coming up as an issue whenever we discuss problems for young crofters. So access to croftland, whether that's the availability of crofts for sale or the price of available crofts being unaffordable, is the fundamental barrier for new entrants, and particularly for aspiring young crofters. So I'll ask the panelists, what is the solution? I won't ask everybody to answer this. So I'll go first to Rod. see what your thoughts are, and if some of the other panel members do want to say something, I will come to some of the others, but if anybody does want to say anything on it, then please indicate to me. But I'll let Rod answer first. And sorry, before you start, there was a wee supplementary to this came through in the chat on the percentage of crofts that are potentially neglected, which I won't ask you to quote a figure, but just an indication.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I don't need to quote a figure, Donald, on the crofts that are neglected or unoccupied. It would be quite regional, and I'm not going to target any region. But I think if you go around with your eyes open around the crofting counties, it's there in front of you. So no, I'm not even going to attempt to answer that. Right, affordability is a supply-demand thing. There's loads of people, as we know, would aspire to have a croft. And we know that when a croft assignation or an owner-occupied croft comes up, it makes a fair price. Now, what you've got there is a position where there's very little on the market. We've got loads of people who succeed to croft. It's a right, it's a land right, and legally you can't take that land right from them. But I do think if, instead of applying the rules, now I did see a question come up in the text box, can't remember who it was from, but they said, was there a legislative procedure for taking a croft from somebody who neglected or wasn't resident? Was that right?
Yes, yeah, that's what the question says.
Yeah, so that was the question. Well, yes, there is, and it's under 26, Section 26 of the Crofting Act. But it's a prescriptive thing, very, very prescriptive in the Crofting Act. If somebody's not resident or they're misusing or neglecting their croft and it becomes a breach of duties action with the Commission, yes, the Commission can take action. However, that is quite a lengthy procedure. Saying that, the Commission has taken action and been successful. We've taken tenancies from people and asked the landlord. The landlord has to get the first option to reallocate the tenancy if it becomes vacant. If, however, after a period of, I think it's a couple of months, the landlord doesn't, the Commission takes over and can interview applicants for that croft. So there is a procedure, but it's a very lengthy procedure. I would like to think that we could approach that in a more proactive way, and we could maybe ask people who are not resident. We've got a crofting census. Now, off that crofting census, we get about 78% returned, forms returned. So there's about 20% of people who don't return their crofting census for whatever reason. There are self-reporters as well. Some people say on the crofting census that they're not living in their croft. Now, our duties team, we're hoping to beef up the duties team, and we will follow those people up with letters. Now, rather than follow the prescriptive route, which is lengthy, I would like to think that we could proactively tell people what they can do with that croft. A lot of the people who have crofts now have succeeded to them. They perhaps don't want the croft. They perhaps have never been to the croft. They haven't been to the croft maybe for 2 years, 3 years, whatever. They've been bequeathed the croft by their granny or their auntie or whatever. And somebody in the locality, how many times, I bet you, Donald, that you've been told in your area that there's a croft along the road, you would almost have to do a search to find out who the crofter was. It's probably changed hands 2 or 3 times over the years. The fact that it's just it come to that person by succession. So we have to have a mechanism where I think we have to contact people who have the crofts and say, and well, look, this is what could happen, worst case scenario. The croft could come, the tenancy could be taken from you with no compensation after the Commission take action, or there is a mechanism, and that's where we need our friends in Scottish Government like Gordon and Michael and Bill to explain to people or have a mechanism where they could get something for it, an exchange. I think there was a croft outgoer scheme a few years ago. So I think if it was explained to somebody that, if it comes to the end of the procedure or the process, they could actually lose their croft for no compensation. But there is a market out there. I do think there has to be a marketplace, but I think if more crofts come vacant, the price will come down. we see crofts in scenic locations making absolutely silly money. Well, okay, that's probably an exception. But there are crofts out there for the tens being exchanged, or assignations being exchanged for the tens of thousands of pounds. But I think that price could come down if there were more available.
Right. And what you mentioned some of the other panel members there, but what is required to allow the Commission to start moving in that direction? Is it a resource issue at the moment?
Donald. 2 seconds. I'll put my thing on again. Yeah.
What did you say? I lost a bit after the Commission.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, what does the Commission need to start moving in that direction? Is it a resource issue, or is it direction from government?
Well, not direction from government. No, this board of 9 commissioners are very, very keen that we follow that duties route. It is resource. Yeah, we need resource for our duties team. But as you're maybe been aware in the past few weeks, we've got additional resource for promotion of crofting. And I do think that promotion of crofting it's a very, very wide term. So I think we can beef up our duties team, but I think it has to be done in a slightly different way. And I think we need to send a message out that if you have a neglected or an absentee croft, or a croft that's been vacant, I think that we need to tell people that there is an easy way for them to do it. And that means, put it up for let. I know SCF keep a list of people looking for crofts, and I'm sure the list of people looking for crofts is way greater than those seeking to let their croft out.
Yeah.
So yeah, resources always comes into it, but I think we could use that resource far more effectively.
Yeah. So on that note, Gordon, what do you think about what Rod said, and any other ideas yourself on this problem? What is the solution to access to croft land?
I think it's fair to say that the Scottish Government very much recognises the importance of undertaking work in this area. The Crofting Commission has got a statutory function of promoting the interests of crofting. So crofting development type activities come within that. Now, we've had recent discussions, and discussions are ongoing, and the Board of Commissioners are continuing to discuss how best to use the additional resources that have been made available to the Crofting Commission and how to further the aims. Rod rightfully says that the scope of the definition of promoting the interests of crofting is really quite wide. So it does give the Crofting Commission scope to do different things that bring crofts back into use, deal with neglect, absenteeism. If you consider, for example, the 20% of crofters who don't respond to the census, together with the percentage, I don't know what that percentage is off the top of my head, so the ones who say they're absent and can no longer work the croft, then that represents a fantastic opportunity to take things forward. And that in turn links into creating opportunities for new entrants to enter the sector as well.
Great. Does anybody else want to say anything on that before we move on? Bill?
Yeah, Donald. So sorry, in my wee introduction, I forgot to say that another little bit of my job is that management of Scottish Ministers Crofton Estates sits within myself and my team. So a couple of things from that. The Commission returned to us a few crofts that they had terminated tenancies in, and we've relet using our policy. It's been a fantastic thing for us to do because we got applicants, local young applicants, because our policy was prioritising that. We relet at the cost of the permanent improvements. So for one croft in Barra, it was under £1,000. For a croft in Benbecula, I think it was under £1,000 as well in terms of permanent improvement costs. So we have 2 new tenants in there, and we clearly have we have the ability to do that, but we need to get hold of the vacant crofts to do that as a landlord. To do that, we need to work better with the Crofting Commission, and I think Rod and Bill Barron and ourselves have had some initial discussion around how we might do that. So we're hopeful that maybe we can look at more opportunities. But the thing that strikes me is you're listening to Cabinet Secretary message early on. He's talking about the culture and the history associated with it, and that's what makes this so complex as an issue, because clearly for so many people they have so many links to the land, and handing that over to someone else, I think we all recognise is a very difficult thing to do. So clearly it has to be a carrot and an incentive and a mind over carrot over the stick. But obviously Rod's organisation and their stick is going to be an important part of that if we can make that work. But clearly that the carrot side is going to be the easier route, and I think it'll be interesting to hear from other parties whether anyone strongly objects to that direction. But it seems to me to be the biggest issue as a Crofton landlord in terms of offering opportunities for new crofters.
Yeah.
Thanks, Donald.
Yeah. Siobhan, did you want to come in there as well?
Yes, following on from what Bill just said about heritage, and there's a bit of a fear amongst crofters that they're going to lose everything if they assign their croft. And I wonder whether if we had something like the old Outgoers scheme where we helped people with decrofting their house so that they still retained their house, and did things like the crofting register for them, whether quite small things like that would help people to take the leap to pass their croft on. The other thing is, along with the Crofting Commission, under the Farm Advisory Service, there's videos being produced which are all about decrofting and assignations and purposeful use, and they're quite kind of friendly cartoons that we hope will maybe encourage people to look at these things and take that leap. And the other thing was, I suppose, is if you're a young crofter, is to look at things like the mentoring scheme, and to maybe see if you can let land or work along with some other crofters so that you get in tow with people, and that you can prove your worth and prove that you can do these things. Because you could still start a flock of sheep, for instance, just by letting some land, and not necessarily having a croft, but maybe that's a way in. I know it's not as good as having a croft and having a house, but it's a start.
Yeah, absolutely. It strikes me listening to those responses that a lot of the tools already exist, and it's just about applying them in the right way, and actually just letting people know what their options are, and starting a dialogue with the people who have the crofts that aren't being used, and to just try and explain what the options are. But yeah, it's encouraging to hear everybody sounds like they're on the same page, which is always good. It's always a good start.
Donald, oh, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, can I just add to that, but just about policies, just to make the meeting aware, or just to...
Yeah.
But in the past few weeks, the Commission adopted a policy where we've reduced our policy on short-term subletting and short-term lets by non-resident crofters. And it's changed as a result. The Commission normally restrict applications from non-resident crofters to 5 years or less, unless there are exceptional circumstances which would justify a longer period. Now, before it was up to 10 years, and actually it was just a stay of execution for a person who was non-resident. So what we've decided now is to make it 5 years or less, and actually look at it. So it'll not be treated from the Commission's view as a straightforward application, and it'll be escalated to a decision-making process. So it was almost a bit of a cop-out, I suppose, the sublet before to a non-resident crofter. They could get a stay of execution for up to 10 years. But we want to make them think about why they're non-resident and give them options as well. So yes, one option is, we haven't taken away totally the short-term let, however, or the sublet, we haven't taken that away completely, but we think about it and think about other options for their croft.
Right. Thanks for that, Rod. Did somebody else want to come in again?
Yeah,
sorry.
Donald, oh, sorry.
Michael?
It's Michael. Can I come in just?
Yeah.
Just add a couple of points. Yeah, I think it's. I agree with what everybody's been saying. I think the Commission is obviously trying to address absenteeism and other breaches of duty, and obviously working to bring crofts back into productive use. I mean, there was over, I think, about 680 breaches of duty in the last census, and there was approximately 5,000 crofters did not return their annual census. So when you take that 686, and there will definitely be cases within that 5,000 where there are definitely opportunities, I think, for new entrants.
Yeah.
I think that succession planning, which has obviously been touched upon, I think is also key to creating those opportunities. I think that it's important to kind of highlight that the succession is not about retirement. It's about planning for the future and ensuring that that crofters and their families and their businesses are all very carefully considered. So I think that collectively that we need to encourage and help facilitate, I think, early discussion by providing the necessary support mechanisms for crofters to recognise the benefits of planning ahead. Yeah. I think that, and I think it was Rod that picked up on it, he was saying that the appropriate assistance to the outgoing and incoming crofter has to be in place, obviously, to try and reduce those impediments to transfers. And that should, quality advice on a broad range of topics. And I think that the Commission, with its specialist knowledge, certainly working in partnership with other organisations, could play a coordinating role in this process.
Thanks. I'm going to move on now. I think that other people do want to come in on that, but we'll go on to the next question. And another hot topic, and one that came up quite a bit in an earlier session today, is the climate emergency. So at our January meeting, the Scottish Crofting Federation agreed that the climate emergency would be one of our campaigning priorities for the year. We recognise that it is a really important thing for crofters, and that crofting is at the forefront of it, but also has a potential role to play in combating it. So what do you think the climate emergency means for crofting, and what are the challenges, and are there any opportunities? And just to tag on to the end of that, there was a question in the chat about carbon sequestration and whether there could be incentives for that. So I'm going to go to Claudia first on this one, and let you have your say on it.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's great that it's been a hot topic in your discussions today, and with all the other awful emergencies that we're all in the midst of, it's quite hard to find the focus on the climate emergency. So we've been trying to look at how the response to the COVID economic crisis can be an opportunity to address climate change at the same time. And so that we get the right investments in nature to help us adapt really whatever emissions reductions we manage in the big emitting sectors. Agriculture is one, but in transport, construction, oil and gas, buildings, we are going to be living in a warming world. And how land management can be used for helping deal with flooding is going to be a critical issue, whatever we do. But also, as I mentioned, the ability for using soils, peat soils, grassland soils, to capture and store carbon is one of the essential elements that Scotland needs to take to address climate change, given that most of our peatland soils are in a poor condition. 80% of peatland soils are degraded, and most of them are found across the crofting counties as well. And so there is a great opportunity to restore the peatland soils, which will then capture this carbon. Well, it stops the peatland eroding and emitting, and it makes it better quality for grazing and habitats as well, you know, but at the same time. There are, you know, picking up, I mean, I've talked about peatland, obviously woodland crofts has been mentioned, and I know it's always been hard to integrate woodland into crofting system, into active crofting and traditional activities, but it's part of a cultural change we're going to have to get used to about agroforestry, or whatever you want to call the term, of integrating some woodland into traditional crofting activity. And, you know, if anyone can do it, it's the young crofters that are going to be looking to the future about what's needed and what's exciting about this land use agenda. Picking up just then briefly on the incentives, obviously there are current incentives through Agri-Environment Scheme to encourage native woodland, and there are through EECS as well on moorland management. But there is also the Peatland Action Fund that runs separately, that Scottish Government has made a massive commitment to, of £250 million over the next 10 years. So that is there as an opportunity, particularly as well, maybe for common grazings, to access that, but certainly something we are working on and trying to help inform Scottish Government policy is what are the mechanisms, what private finance can you bring in to getting additional money, but how can we improve future support to provide greater incentives for addressing the climate emergency. Scottish Government have got some of the biggest, most ambitious targets in the world. So they are committed to this. And, you know, how we all do that together is, you know, I'm interested to hear other people's views. But
thanks, Claudia. Lots to think about there. Siobhan, do you want to come in on this? I'm thinking about, you know, there's quite a lot of talk about agricultural methods and maybe ways that we can use technology to maybe even graze our livestock better, and methods to lock down more carbon in the soil. Any thoughts?
There's I mean, we do quite a lot of carbon audits for crofters, and you know, our carbon footprint from West Coast and Island livestock systems isn't good, and it's very difficult because of distance to markets and the travel that our inputs have. So it is really difficult to fix things like that, but there are other things that we can do, and there's lots of technology that's being looked at the moment. So things like different breeds of cattle emit different amounts of methane, and so there's lots of work going on at the moment to look at what we can do in terms of choosing the right genetics in our cattle and sheep. And also there's work ongoing on different feed additives that will help reduce methane as well. Also some very simple things that we can be doing just now, such as rotational grazing of grassland, which increases grassland output for no cost. It's just a simple management measure. So there are lots of things that we can be doing just now that are quite small and quite cheap and easy to do, but it's it's going to be very tricky going forward to make big changes.
Thanks, Siobhan. Do any of the other panel members want to come in on that? I'm conscious of the time that we should be finishing the session now, so I understand if anybody has to leave, but we'll try and go on for another 10 minutes or so. Anybody else on climate?
Well, just a brief one to build on what Siobhan was saying there in relation to carbon audits, just to draw everybody's attention to the fact that there's integrated land management plans available to crofters as well, and quite often crofters look at these and look at the £1,500 of free advice and consider that it's much too large and complex for crofters. But that's the maximum amount of grant. It doesn't need to be that amount of money. There could be many integrated land management plans produced, and that service is available through the Farm Advisory Service.
Thanks.
Can I just make a quick comment, please, Donald?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, like we're saying at the outset, climate change and the loss of biodiversity, it will affect Crofton. However, these challenges, I think, could also bring opportunities, especially if it can be demonstrated that Crofton makes an important contribution, and that this contribution is basically allied to, kind of particular Crofton practices and traditions. And just picking up just something on what Claudia said when she made reference to the 80% of Scotland's peatland is in poor condition. When you see that the densest peatlands areas are in Caithness, Western Isles, West and East Highlands, these are all Crofton areas. So these are actually opportunities, believe it or not, I think, for crofters within these areas, especially once we're able to map out where those degraded peatlands are and then try and match them up with common grazings and townships. Then we can hopefully kind of work together in order to obviously restore these peatlands. And I think as well as through the forestry grant scheme, that we obviously want to help crofters to try and integrate trees into their businesses, which can obviously increase our common grazing's viability as well.
Thanks, Michael. A question that's come up in the chat on the National Development Plan for Crofting. The question is, when is it due? And maybe if Aileen or Michael would like to talk a wee bit about it.
I'll pick up that, Donald. Yeah,
thanks, Michael.
Plan, no problem. Working the plan is progressing. Many of us, obviously within the Scottish Government, have and are focusing some of our time on matters relating to the current health crisis, and obviously rightly so. However, working the plan does continue, and we are looking to try and publish by the end of this year. The plan, it will build on the work undertaken by the Crofton Stakeholder Forum and its 6 priority papers. The responses we received to our stability and simplicity consultation, the responses we received to the consultation on Crofton legislation and future priorities for Crofton, also the survey results that we got from the Economic Condition of Crofton report, and obviously together with the various published reports that have been either carried out on the subject of Crofton or affect Crofton. There's also been much engagement with stakeholders through the Stakeholder Forum, which will obviously continue right up until the plan is published. In fact, just yesterday, the forum met and we were just discussing the recent consultation carried out by the Law Society of Scotland, and we were also discussing localised food networks. The plan itself, it will focus on collaborative working. It will also build on the recognition that there already exists a wide range of grants and support for crofters. It will be split into various sections such as environment and biodiversity, housing, signposting, financial incentives, wildlife, which will cover seagulls, deer and geese, the bull stud, and obviously Crofton development and the role of the Crofton Commission. I think that a number of these areas obviously focus on young crofters and new entrants. I've recently shared a draft version of the first half of the plan with the Commission, and I look forward to receiving obviously its comments, and I'm currently drafting the second half of it. So, and obviously one area I'm very keen to focus on is our attention on the Commission's role in the future development of Crofton, picking up on what Patrick said at the outset. And obviously the fact that the Cabinet Secretary, he recently announced the additional £325,000 worth of funding for the Commission. And this funding is to create 4 new Commission jobs in the Western Isles, but it's also for the Commission to expand its development activities across all the Crofton counties. And we're obviously very much in favour of expanding the Commission's development capacity. And we've already had discussions and exchanged ideas with the Commission and with Rod, and what these priorities may be and how they may be achieved. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael, for that. Any of the other panel members want to come in on that? No. Move on. I'm trying to decide where to go next with the questions. There's a lot, and we won't get through them all. So it wouldn't be a discussion on crofting without a bit of geese. So we had this one came up earlier. How can conflict between geese and sustaining active crofting be resolved, particularly in relation to safeguarding other conservation issues as well as crofters, as well as crofting? Sorry. I'll go to Bill first on this one.
Okay. I mean, it's probably one of the most challenging conundrums that certainly I face in my day-to-day working life. As a chair of a number of local goose groups, I have a slightly bizarre role where I represent the government's interests and positions to a group of local land managers and stakeholder interests, but equally I represent the interests of and views of local stakeholders, crofters and farmers to government, and it's an interesting balance to tightrope to walk. I think, I mean, the issues are really split into two main areas in the geographic areas I look after. Species that are highly protected and a priority for government in terms of making sure they're managed. Predominantly white fronts, in my area Greenland white fronts, and in my area Greenland barnacle geese, and we have a number of schemes run by SNH, but with the goose groups overseeing the strategic delivery of them. They deliver to those areas. They're not perfect by any means. We've managed to roll out some schemes in North Uist and in Tiree, which has been really good over the last couple of years to try and address gaps in those areas. But there's no doubt that the schemes only have another season to run before need agreement on what's going to happen going forward, and clearly that's probably a concern for the groups. Greylags, on the other hand, which are a major problem in well, large parts of Crofton, Scotland, is a persistent issue, and SNH and Scottish Government and the local goose groups have been working for a number of years to try and find solutions to that. SNH, I'm sure Claudia will come next, and SNH will she'll share with you some of the things that government and SNH have been doing to try and improve the position. But there is a heck of a long way to go, and I think it's fair to say the groups and indeed the chairs of the Greylag groups remain concerned about how we will manage this species going forward to get the balance right between active agriculture, which is delivering economic activity, and the biodiversity priorities that the government's got. So it is a huge challenge.
Thanks, Bill. I think that's a good intro to you, Claudia. Oh, you're mute. Thanks.
I've got to go at 4, but that
Okay.
isn't just because I'm talking about geese. But I mean, Bill's obviously summarised it. The sort of 2 approaches depend on the conservation status. For the highest conservation status and the barnacle geese, it is about the local goose groups and coming together and having the discussion and understanding the different needs between impacts on farming and the conservation status. And that's never going to be an easy discussion, but bringing people together in that discussion is how you, at the end of the day, it's a human conflict. It's not a goose and agricultural conflict. So that is really where we invest the time, and obviously people like Bill and yourselves who are member of the groups. I mean, just one additional thing on that, Scotland is leading the way around goose conflicts are replicated across the world between hunters, farmers, shooters, conservationists, all of this thing. And Scotland are leading the way to develop an international plan for the management of barnacle geese around its flyway, so that we can set numbers that can be considered a conservation minimum and what would be appropriate to cull above that, and what's the best way to do it. So I'll just add that on the barnacle geese. Absolutely on the grey lags, I mean, they're increasing numbers. Again, all of you will have experienced that across the crofting counties. And, you know, slightly we've been caught on the hoof, on the hop, because we've said, oh, it's not our problem, it's not our problem, just get on and deal with them. They're not a conservation, you know, they're just a pest to us. They're very high numbers. They're like rooks and crows or whatever, that wood pigeons, the numbers escalating. So just get on and manage them. But we have spent many years testing what that get on and manage it means. And, you know, I think we are in a much better place now. We've changed the general licensing this year. So that's really lightening up the regulation to enable crofters to control grey lags where they need to control them. We've got exemptions from the European Commission to be able to sell goose meat into markets, and we're trying to make that a more secure market, which would bring opportunities in due course. And we've been trying to work with local goose groups to build capacity and identify, certainly in some areas it's not the same across all the areas where the geese are, about for market opportunities to match hunters and shooters who want to come and shoot the things. So we've been trying to work that, and personally I feel we have done the list of the things that people have been saying, you must do this, you must do this. So we're making progress. But I acknowledge it's difficult, and it's going to need perpetual management. So it comes back to where we were at the beginning of the debate about crofting needing active management, needing people there, needing well-managed crofts. But I'll have to go in 2 minutes, but I'm happy to listen to anything, comments, and I'll pack up any comments in the chat, hopefully afterwards.
Yeah.
If there are other comments. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. And I think we're going to have to stop there for the questions, but which is a real shame because we've got so many there, and we've got topics on Croft House Grant Scheme, crofting law, loads of stuff that we could go on all day, but I'll have to draw it to a close there. And thank the panelists. And what we will do is try and capture those questions, and we will put them to the relevant people and try and get some answers and in the future, and certainly make them a focus for sessions like this in the future.